Long ago, nestled between gentle hills and ancient oak groves, stood the city of Alerin. It was a quiet, walled town with pointed rooftops and watchtowers wrapped in ivy. The cobblestone streets wound like sleepy rivers between homes built of timber and stone. As evening fell, a golden hush settled over the town. Merchants closed their wooden shutters and lit lanterns outside their shops, each lantern bearing the emblem of a trade guild. The scent of bread, still warm from the ovens, drifted through the alleys, mixing with the sweet perfume of herbs from the apothecary's house. Children's laughter faded into the shadows as they were called inside. A soft wind stirred the linen drying on ropes overhead. It was in this town, under the shadow of an old moss-covered tower, that a man named Edric lived. Edric was not a knight or a noble. He was an apothecary, quiet, patient, and kind. His home was lined with shelves of dried flowers, polished stones, and vials filled with glowing liquids. Each evening, as the bells tolled from the abbey, Edric lit a small candle and sipped herbal tea, preparing to close his day. Tonight, as the candle flickered, a knock echoed at his door. It was a traveler, lost on his way to the southern pass. Edric, with a smile, offered him a seat by the fire and a bowl of stew. And so began a quiet tale, like many that drift through sleepy towns on gentle nights. The next morning, Edric rose with the mist. He stepped outside to gather herbs from the meadow beyond the town walls. He greeted the guards at the southern gate, who nodded without words, wrapped in their cloaks. Outside the town, the land rolled like soft waves. Lavender and wild thyme blanketed the hills, and bees hummed lazily through the cool air. Edric carried a woven basket and wore a dark blue cloak stitched with silver thread. His boots, worn but well cared for, made little sound on the dew-soaked grass. He stopped at the base of an old willow, whispering thanks to the tree as he picked valerian root. To Edric, the plants were old friends. Each had a purpose, each a story. He hummed a lullaby his mother once sang while crushing mint between his fingers. On the third day, bells rang out across Alerin. It was market day. Stalls opened early in the square. There were baskets of berries, bundles of wool, and jars of honey gleaming in the sun. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, pointing at wind-up toys carved from pine wood. A tall man with a feathered cap played the flute, drawing a small crowd near the fountain. Edric set up a modest stand with bundles of lavender, rosemary, and rosehip tea. His friend Mira, the baker's daughter, brought him a warm scone. "For luck," she said. An old knight stopped at Edric's stall. He had a limp and asked for something to ease the pain in his knees. Edric gave him a vial of comfrey oil wrapped in linen. The knight smiled. "You heal without steel. That's rarer than gold these days." Edric only nodded. That evening, as Edric walked home beneath a sky streaked with violet clouds, thunder rumbled in the distance. He reached his cottage just as the rain began to fall. Thick droplets tapped against the window panes like fingers seeking warmth. Edric lit his hearth and placed a kettle over the flame. As he sipped his tea, the wind howled outside. From his cupboard, he pulled a thick book, leather-bound and heavy with pressed herbs between its pages. He read by candlelight, the rain drumming steady and soft. Outside, the streets emptied, and the city seemed to hold its breath. Edric felt safe in his little house, nestled in the arms of the old town. In the middle of the storm, a knock came again. This time it was Mira, soaked from head to toe. "The wind tore our shutters," she said. Edric welcomed her inside, handing her a warm towel and a place near the fire. They spoke in hushed tones of stars, seasons, and forgotten songs. Next day, Edric traveled north to the Abbey of Still Waters. He carried a satchel of rare herbs requested by the sisters who brewed tinctures and balms for the poor. The path to the abbey wound through pine forests and along slow, silver streams. A deer watched him from the underbrush, its breath visible in the morning chill. Edric paused often to admire the ferns and mushrooms, noting their placement in his sketchbook. The abbey stood like a stone sentinel at the foot of the mountain. Its bells chimed gently in the wind. The sisters greeted him with warm smiles and led him to the apothecarium, where the scent of rosemary, beeswax, and cedarwood hung in the air. He worked beside them that afternoon, teaching a young novice how to blend elderflower with chamomile. The peace of the abbey was deep, like sleep before dreams. In the gentle valley of Windermere, where tall grass sways like the sea and the hills wear cloaks of mist, morning came quietly. A cool fog rolled through the narrow streets, curling around thatched roofs and wooden signposts. The bells of St. Rowan's Chapel tolled faintly, echoing through the silence. In a small corner of the village, beneath an arched stone bridge, lived a cobbler named Halric. His shop was no more than a room with a hearth and a window, but it smelled of warm leather and pine wood. As the sun struggled through the clouds, Halric tied on his apron and opened the shutters, letting in the scent of dew and chimney smoke. Each morning, the townsfolk brought their worn boots and scuffed slippers. Halric would greet them with a nod and begin his quiet work. The sound of his hammer and awl was steady and soothing, like a heartbeat for the town. One morning, a young knight in training named Colin arrived at Halric's door. He was tall and nervous, with a sword too big for his belt. His boots, though fine leather, were worn from training. Halric took them gently. "These have seen ambition," he said. Callan laughed shyly and told stories of the barracks, of sparring in the rain, and of dreams of knighthood. Halric listened, smiling, as he stitched the soles with quiet precision. When the boots were mended, Callan stood taller. "Thank you, Master Halric. I'll wear them to my first real patrol." Halric only nodded, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Then may they bring you home again." Market day filled Windermere with colors and song. Stalls lined the square, selling clay pots, dried apples, and ribbons that danced in the breeze. A juggler in red cap spun torches in front of the old fountain. Halric never sold anything in the market, but he loved to walk its edge. He bought a tin of beeswax, a pouch of dried mint, and a book of fables from a traveling monk. Children ran past him with pastries and giggles. At the edge of the market, an old woman offered him a string of small wind chimes made from shells. "For your window," she said. Back in his shop, Halric hung them by the open pane. They sang softly in the afternoon breeze. Later that week, clouds thickened above Windermere. Rain came slowly at first, tapping the tiled roofs like a patient guest. Then came the downpour. Halric sat by his window, polishing a pair of traveling boots. The wind chimes whispered as drops streamed down the glass. He thought of his younger days, of long roads and quiet inns, of a friend once lost in a storm much like this. He paused, set the boots aside, and opened the book of fables. The words calmed him like old songs. As night fell, the village lights flickered beneath the heavy clouds, and Halric, wrapped in a wool blanket, drifted gently to sleep in his chair. One morning, after the rains had passed, a stranger came to Windermere. She wore a green cloak, heavy with travel, but her feet were bare. Mud clung to her heels. Halric welcomed her inside without question. She said little, only that she had walked far and needed shoes. He measured her feet and offered her tea. She watched the chimes sway as he worked. By evening, a pair of soft leather slippers lay beside her. "You're kind," she said, placing a silver coin on the table. Halric did not look at it. May the road ahead be kind in return. As seasons shifted, Halric kept on. His hands grew slower, but his heart remained steady. He watched children grow into travelers, and old men return as friends. Boots came and went, carrying stories between their seams. On one soft evening, as dusk painted the sky in gentle rose, Halric lit his lantern and placed it in the window. The chimes still whispered, and the hearth still warmed the little shop. He closed his book, folded his apron, and sat beside the fire. Outside, the roads were quiet. Inside, sleep came like a slow tide, carrying him into dreams of far hills and peaceful paths. And the village of Windmere slept on. Alderwin was a quiet village nestled between old birch forests and winding creeks. The mornings there were slow and silver-touched, with mist clinging to every leaf and stone. At the edge of the village lived a man named Theron, the candlemaker. His cottage sat beneath a crooked oak, and his windows always glowed amber from the wax fires within. Each morning, he walked barefoot into his garden to gather herbs that he mixed into his candles: lavender, sage, rosemary. Theron was not young nor old. His beard was gray and soft, and his eyes were always half-lidded, as if remembering something distant. When the sun rose behind the trees, he began to pour. One morning, a rider came to Alderwin with a message. The Countess of Darrenwood sought Theron's candles for her hall. She had heard of their fragrance and calm and wished for them in the long winter nights. Theron accepted the request quietly. He spent the next week crafting candles of blue wax, wrapped with sprigs of cedar and thyme. Each candle held a small dried blossom pressed into the side. When they were done, he packed them into a wooden crate and delivered them to the passing courier. That night, as the wind rustled the oak leaves, Theron lit one of his own and let it flicker beside him. One morning, a rider came to Alderwin with a message. The Countess of Darrenwood sought Theron's candles for her hall. She had heard of their fragrance and calm and wished for them in the long winter nights. Theron accepted the request quietly. He spent the next week crafting candles of blue wax, wrapped with sprigs of cedar and thyme. Each candle held a small dried blossom pressed into the side. When they were done, he packed them into a wooden crate and delivered them to the passing courier. That night, as the wind rustled the oak leaves, Theron lit one of his own and let it flicker beside him. Every year, Alderwin held the Festival of Stars on the longest night. Lanterns were hung from trees, songs were sung around bonfires, and every villager brought a candle to float down the river. Theron made a special candle each year for this night. This time, it was a tall column of ivory wax, with tiny carvings of birds and constellations around its edge. As the villagers released their candles onto the dark water, Theron stood at the bridge, watching the light drift like stars on the current. His candle floated last, burning steady as it vanished into the bend of the creek. Midwinter brought heavy snow. One evening, as flakes danced outside his window, Theron heard a knock. A traveler stood there, cloaked in blue with frost clinging to her lashes. She said little, only that she had followed the candlelight from the woods. Theron made her tea with honey and placed a small candle beside her, one scented with pine and clove. They sat without speaking, the fire crackling, until the snow slowed. Before she left, she placed a white feather on his table. "For peace," she said. And then she was gone. One rainy morning, while retrieving fallen branches, Theron discovered a hollow behind the woodpile, a forgotten door. Inside was a small room filled with old scrolls, bottles of wax, and sketches of candle designs he had never made. It smelled of lavender and old parchment. In the corner, a tiny journal rested, written in his own handwriting, though he had no memory of it. He spent that evening reading, discovering notes of dreams, visions, and candles made to calm grief, to soften anger, to inspire courage. He felt as though part of himself had returned. As spring neared, Theron began placing candles along the old paths leading from Alderwyn into the forest. Each was set in a small glass lantern, glowing softly through the night. Travelers would later say they never felt lost when near Alderwyn, as if something always gently guided them back to the road. On the final evening of winter, Theron sat beneath his oak, a ring of candles glowing around him. He closed his eyes, listening to the soft wind through the trees, the flicker of flames, and the heartbeat of the earth beneath him. Sleep came quietly, and the light of Alderwyn continued to glow, guiding dreams and wanderers alike. In the village of Eldhollow, where rivers sang softly and willows brushed the sky, lived an old weaver named Milas. Her cottage, filled with spools of colored thread and bolts of cloth, sat beside a gentle brook. Each morning, Milas sat at her loom, her fingers moving slowly, weaving patterns inspired by the forest. The rhythmic clack of the loom was like a lullaby, soothing the quiet village. Birds called outside her window, and the scent of fresh linen mixed with wildflowers. Milas smiled softly, thinking of the cloth she would weave for the upcoming harvest festival. One warm afternoon, the village baker, Bram, stopped by with a basket of warm bread and honey. He greeted Milas with a cheerful nod and shared stories of the day's baking. Milas offered him tea brewed from chamomile and mint, and they sat together by the hearth. Bram talked about his hopes for the festival, while Milas showed him a piece of cloth with delicate leaf patterns. The light from the fire flickered softly, casting shadows that danced like quiet spirits. As evening settled, Milas took a slow walk through Eldhollow. The sky faded into shades of pink and purple, and the village lights began to glow. She passed the chapel where lanterns hung on iron hooks, their flames flickering gently. The scent of wood smoke drifted through the air, mingling with the crisp scent of autumn leaves. At the edge of the village, the brook whispered its secrets, and Milas listened, feeling the calm of the fading day. One evening, as Milas returned home, she heard a soft melody floating through the trees. A young traveler sat by the well, playing a lute. He smiled and nodded a greeting. His song was gentle, full of longing and hope. Milas sat quietly, letting the music fill the cool night air. When the last note faded, the traveler rose and thanked her for listening before continuing on his journey under the starlit sky. Back at her cottage, Milas returned to her loom. The moonlight streamed through the window, silvering the threads and making the cloth shimmer. She worked slowly, her fingers tracing the patterns like a story told in silence. Outside, the night was still, save for the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional call of an owl. The cloth grew under her hands, each thread a quiet prayer for peace. As the night deepened, Milas laid down her shuttle and closed her eyes. The village slept peacefully, wrapped in the soft glow of lanterns and stars. Dreams of forests, rivers, and gentle winds filled her mind. She felt connected to the earth, the village, and the countless stories woven into the fabric of her life. With a contented sigh, Mailis drifted into sleep, her heart steady and calm, ready to greet the dawn, ready to greet the Lantern Keeper's journey. Part 1. Dawn at the harbor. The coastal town of Briswell lay wrapped in the soft embrace of early morning mist. A gentle breeze carried the salty scent of the sea, mingling with the faint aroma of damp earth and wild thyme growing along the cliffs. The harbor, usually bustling by midday, rested quietly under a pale sky that slowly blossomed from navy blue to tender hues of rose and gold. Eamon, the lantern keeper, stirred from his sleep as the first light brushed his window pane. His small cottage, perched near the docks, was humble and filled with the soft clutter of his daily life. A worn wooden bench, an assortment of lanterns in various stages of repair, and shelves lined with small oil flasks and brass tools gleaming faintly in the dawn. He rose carefully, the wooden floor creaking beneath his feet, and wrapped himself in a woolen cloak. Outside, the world was still hushed. The faint call of a distant gull echoed across the water, and somewhere, a fisherman's dog barked softly. Eamon stepped outside, his breath forming a thin mist in the crisp air. The harbor was peaceful, the fishing boats gently swaying like sleepy children in their cradles. Nets hung drying on wooden frames, and the scent of salt lingered on the breeze. Eamon's task for the morning was sacred: to prepare the lanterns that would guide the sailors safely home once nightfall came. He moved slowly along the pier, a wicker basket in hand filled with clean glass panes and fresh wicks. With care, he polished each lantern's brass fittings until they gleamed softly, wiping away the faint fingerprints and salt deposits left by last night's winds. The light of the awakening sun caught the glass, scattering tiny rainbows across the wooden planks. As he worked, his mind wandered to the stories the lanterns held. The countless journeys made beneath their glow, the sailors who had found their way back through storm and fog. He imagined the faces of those men and women, tired but safe, returning to warm fires and waiting arms. Near the edge of the pier stood an old, weather-worn bench where Eamon paused to rest. His fingers traced the rough grain of the wood, worn smooth over years of use. From here, he could see the whole village slowly stirring, shutters creaking open, smoke curling from chimneys, and children's laughter drifting faintly on the breeze. The sound of footsteps drew his attention. It was young Lena, the baker's daughter, carrying a basket of fresh rolls. She smiled shyly as she passed, offering a small wave. Eamon nodded kindly in return, feeling a quiet warmth spread through his chest. The day stretched gently ahead, filled with the simple rhythms of tending lanterns, sharing quiet moments, and watching over the harbor's sleepy heart. And as the sun climbed higher, Eamon felt a steady calm settle over him, a promise of light in the coming dark, and a night full of peaceful journeys. Part 2. The Blacksmith's Tale. The forge's glowing embers cast a comforting red light, flickering against the stone walls of Aldrich's workshop. The steady rhythm of hammer-meeting anvil created a soft, reassuring music that echoed through the narrow streets of Briswell. Eamon made his way toward the forge, boots crunching on gravel, his cloak brushing against the rough wooden fences. The scent of hot metal, mixed with wood smoke and sweat, greeted him before he saw Aldrich himself. A broad-shouldered man with a soot-smudged face and kind eyes that gleamed with stories. "Good morning, Eamon," Aldrich called, wiping his brow with a leather cloth. "The harvest fair is coming soon. Will you join the feast this year?" Eamon smiled gently. "I'll be here, keeping the lanterns burning, but I look forward to the sounds and smells from afar." The two men sat by the forge's edge, sharing a mug of warm cider. Aldrich spoke of past fairs, the laughter of children chasing ribbons, the smell of spiced meats, and the music that lifted even the heaviest hearts. Eamon listened, letting the warmth of the fire and friendship settle deep within. Outside, the village hummed quietly. A mother rocked her baby by the bakery window, the scent of fresh bread drifting like a promise. The afternoon light grew softer, casting long shadows as the day slowly wound toward evening. Eamon's thoughts wandered to his lanterns waiting for the dark, and to Aldrich's strong arms shaping iron that might become a horseshoe, a blade, or a humble cooking pot. Each small task carried a story, a quiet thread in the fabric of Briswell's life, Part 3. Along the cliffside path. The cliffside path wound gently along the edge of the sea, where the grass bent low to the ocean breeze and wildflowers bloomed in colors soft as dreams. Eamon walked slowly, his boots stirring the morning dew and the faint crunch of pebbles beneath each step. The horizon stretched endlessly, the waves catching the sunlight like scattered jewels. Seagulls soared overhead, their cries blending with the distant roar of the sea against rocky cliffs. Here, the world felt vast and ancient, a place where time moved with the tides. Along the way, a family of rabbits darted across the path, their soft white fur catching the light. Nearby, a heron stood perfectly still, watching the water as if guarding some secret. Eamon paused to breathe deeply, the fresh salt air filling his lungs and calming his spirit. At the end of the path stood a small stone shrine, moss-covered and forgotten. Lantern hooks hung empty, swaying faintly in the breeze. Eamon's fingers brushed the cold stone as he made a silent promise to restore the light here, a beacon for those who walked the lonely cliffs at night. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft pastels as Eamon turned back toward the village, carrying the peace of the cliffs with him like a precious gift. Part 4. Evening preparations. Dusk settled over Briswell like a gentle sigh, folding the village into soft shadows. Lanterns waited patiently along the docks and alleyways, their glass faces gleaming faintly in the fading light. Inside his small workshop, Eamon worked carefully by the flickering glow of a single candle. He filled tiny reservoirs with fresh oil, his hands steady despite the creeping weariness of the day. Each wick was trimmed with precision, a simple act that meant the difference between a bright beacon and a lonely flicker. Outside, the first stars pricked the deepening sky. Villagers hurried home, their footsteps soft on the cobblestones as doors closed against the chill of night. Fires flickered behind windows, promising warmth and rest. Eamon carried lanterns one by one to their posts, lighting each with care. The soft glow spread like a gentle tide, washing away the darkness and filling the streets with quiet comfort. As he worked, he thought of the sailors who would see these lights far out on the water, a promise that home was near. He paused by the old stone well, placing a lantern on its edge. The warm light shimmered in the still water, reflecting tiny stars that seemed to dance in the night. For a moment, Eamon allowed himself to simply watch, the simple beauty of light and shadow mingling beneath the vast sky. Part 5. The Night Watch. The harbor lay wrapped in a blanket of stars, the sea calm and dark beneath their watchful gaze. Eamon walked slowly along the wooden pier, his lantern casting soft pools of light that flickered gently with the evening breeze. The world was hushed, broken only by the distant murmur of waves and the occasional call of a nightbird. Lanterns glowed along the harbor's edge like scattered fireflies, guiding the way for any late travelers or watchful sailors. Eamon paused near the old cliffside shrine, where his small lantern now hung gently from a weathered hook. The light swayed softly, a quiet sentinel against the vastness of the night. He thought of those who might find their way here, wanderers, dreamers, or travelers seeking refuge. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of sea salt and blooming night flowers. Eamon's breath came slow and steady as he continued his walk, each step a soft rhythm in the stillness. As he rounded the final bend toward home, the first hints of dawn whispered on the horizon, promising rest and renewal after the long night watch. Part 6. Rest beneath the stars. Back in his cottage, Eamon settled by the hearth, the warmth of the fire soothing his tired bones. The lanterns outside continued to glow softly, their gentle light a steady presence in the night. He poured a cup of herbal tea, its steam curling lazily into the cool air. With a soft sigh, he sank into his worn chair and opened a well-loved book of poems and tales. The words flowed slowly, each sentence a gentle caress to his weary mind. Outside, the sea whispered against the shore, the stars twinkling like distant lanterns in the sky. Eamon's eyes grew heavy as the night deepened, the quiet beauty of the world around him wrapping him in a peaceful embrace. His thoughts drifted to distant shores and the promise of another day. With the fire flickering low and the gentle hum of the lanterns, sleep carried him softly away, a calm tide flowing beneath a sky full of stars. The Weaver's Daughter of Greystone. Part 1. The Quiet Village. In the gentle folds of a green valley lay the village of Greystone, where cottages with smoke curling from stone chimneys clustered around a small, winding river. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming wildflowers and fresh earth. Here lived Ilara, the weaver's daughter. Each morning she walked barefoot along the riverbank, the soft moss cushioning her steps, gathering flax to spin into thread. The village was peaceful, and its people knew the quiet rhythms of nature. Farmers tending their fields, blacksmiths hammering at dawn, and children chasing butterflies under the open sky. Ilara's days were filled with the clacking of her loom, weaving threads of golden flax into soft cloth, while her mother sang old folk songs passed down through generations. Part 2. The Mysterious Traveler. One misty afternoon, a traveler arrived at the village. Cloaked and hooded, he carried a worn leather satchel and a long staff carved with strange symbols. His eyes held stories of distant lands. The villagers gathered curiously, but Ilara was the only one brave enough to approach him. He introduced himself as Corwin, a scholar searching for ancient tales and forgotten wisdom. He sought the legendary tapestry said to be woven by Greystone's ancestors, a tapestry that held secrets of the stars. Intrigued, Ilara offered to show him her father's old workshop, where some fragments of the ancient weaving were kept. Part 3. Secrets of the Loom. In the dim light of the workshop, dust motes danced above the loom. Corwin studied the threads carefully, tracing the delicate patterns. He explained how the tapestry was said to align with the night sky, connecting the fate of the village with the stars. Ilara listened, fascinated. She touched the aged threads, imagining the hands that wove them long ago. That night, under a sky full of shimmering stars, she dreamed of the tapestry glowing softly, guiding her on a journey beyond the valley. Part 4. The Forest Path. Guided by her dream, Ilara and Corwin set out the next morning along a narrow forest path. The woods were alive with the sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves. Shafts of sunlight filtered through the canopy, warming the mossy ground beneath their feet. They talked quietly of old legends and faraway places. Corwin told stories of kingdoms lost to time and the magic hidden in simple things. A thread, a word, a star. Ilara felt her heart open to the mysteries of the world beyond Greystone. Part 5. The Hidden Clearing. After hours of walking, they reached a hidden clearing where wildflowers grew in a circle and the air shimmered with an unseen light. In the center stood a stone pedestal, weathered by time, but covered in carvings that matched those on Corwin's staff. Ilara laid out a piece of the ancient tapestry on the stone. The threads glowed faintly, and the carvings seemed to come alive, tracing constellations in the air. The clearing filled with a gentle hum, like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. Part 6. Return to Greystone. As twilight painted the sky in hues of purple and gold, Ilara and Corwin made their way back to the village. The stars twinkled brighter than ever, as if welcoming them home. Ilara felt changed, her spirit woven more deeply with the threads of her village and the greater world beyond. She knew that though her feet walked the familiar paths of Greystone, her heart was ready to explore new stories yet to be woven. Back in her cozy cottage, she settled by the fire, her fingers itching to weave new patterns, each thread a memory, a dream, a star. Trick Lantern Keeper's Journey. Part 1. The Village and the Lantern. In the heart of a quiet medieval village called Altenbourg, nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, there lived a man named Bram. Bram was the village's lantern keeper. Each evening as dusk settled, he would light the tall lanterns that lined the cobblestone streets, guiding travelers safely through the night. Bram's small cottage sat near the village square, where the fountain gurgled softly. His home was filled with the warm glow of candlelight and the scent of beeswax and pine. Every morning, Bram tended to his lanterns, polishing the glass and trimming the wicks, preparing for the evening's ritual. Though simple, his life was rich with stories. Villagers often stopped by to chat, farmers returning from the fields, merchants setting up their stalls, children chasing fireflies. Bram listened to their tales and offered a kind word, his deep voice calm like a gentle river. Part 2. The Arrival of the Stranger One. Misty morning, as the village awoke beneath a sky streaked with pale gold, a stranger arrived. She was cloaked in deep blue, her face shadowed by a hood, but her eyes shone bright with curiosity. Her name was Aylin, a wandering herbalist who sought rare plants and ancient knowledge. She carried a satchel filled with dried herbs, glass bottles, and worn books. The villagers greeted her with polite smiles and cautious glances. Bram, ever welcoming, invited her to rest by his fire. Over a simple meal, Ellen spoke of distant lands, forgotten remedies, and legends whispered beneath starlit skies. Bram shared the village's history, the old customs, and the magic he believed lived in the lantern light. Part 3. The Hidden Map. Days passed, and Aylin and Bram often walked together, exploring the woods around Altenbourg. One afternoon, beneath the ancient oaks, they discovered a hidden hollow where moss grew thick and a small leather pouch lay tucked beneath a stone. Inside was an old parchment, a map, drawn with delicate lines and symbols. It hinted at a forgotten path leading to the Silver Grove, a mythical forest said to hold plants with healing powers beyond imagination. The two decided to follow the map, hoping to find what had been lost to time. Their journey promised adventure, but also quiet moments of reflection beneath dappled sunlight and whispering leaves. Part 4. The Forest of Whispers. Entering the Silver Grove, Bram and Aylin found themselves surrounded by towering silver-leaved trees, their branches shimmering like stars. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and pine. Soft whispers seemed to float on the breeze, ancient voices carried from one leaf to another. They walked slowly, collecting herbs and listening to the forest's secrets. Night fell gently, and they made camp beneath a canopy of glowing blossoms. The lantern Bram carried flickered softly, casting dancing shadows. As they rested, Aylin told Bram stories of herbal lore, while Bram shared the songs of the village. Part 5. The Healing Springs. Guided by the map, they reached a hidden spring whose waters sparkled with crystal clarity. Legend said these waters could heal wounds of both body and spirit. Aylin carefully gathered the water in a glass vial, while Bram dipped his hands into the cool stream. They felt a deep peace settle over them, as if the forest itself blessed their quest. They stayed for a time, resting and replenishing, the silence broken only by the gentle splash of water and the call of distant owls. Part 6. Return and Renewal. When they returned to Altenbourg, the village seemed brighter, as if touched by the magic of the Silver Grove. Aylin shared her herbs and remedies, helping the sick and weary. Bram's lanterns burned with renewed light, guiding all who traveled the paths under moon and star. Together, they understood that sometimes the greatest journeys are those that bring us home, changed, yet grounded in the simple beauty of a quiet village. And so, as the village settled into peaceful sleep, Bram's lantern light glowed steadily, a beacon of hope and gentle dreams. The Blacksmith's Promise. Part 1. The Forge at Dawn. In the village of Hearthglen, nestled between towering cliffs and ancient forests, lived a blacksmith named Rowan. Each morning before the sun rose, Rowan stoked the forge's fire until it roared like a dragon's breath. The glow of molten metal lit his workshop, a sturdy stone building filled with the scent of smoke and iron. Villagers often brought him tools and horseshoes, but Rowan's true passion was crafting swords, blades that could protect, honor, and inspire. Though his hands were calloused, his touch was precise and gentle. As the village stirred to life, Rowan paused by the window to watch the mist lift from the fields. He remembered a promise he made long ago, to forge a sword worthy of a hero. Part 2. The Stranger's Request. One misty afternoon, a rider arrived at Hearthglen, cloaked in a heavy gray cloak and riding a sleek black horse. She introduced herself as Lady Isolde, a noblewoman seeking a blade strong enough to defend her people from a rising darkness in the north. She spoke with quiet strength and determination. Rowan listened carefully, impressed by her courage and grace. She asked if he could craft a sword unlike any other, one imbued with the spirit of the mountains and the fire of the forge. Rowan agreed, though he knew it would be his greatest challenge. He asked for time, for the right metal, and for a heart ready to believe in magic. Part 3. Gathering the Elements. Rowan set out early the next day to gather the rare materials he would need. He ventured into the deep forest to find iron-rich stones and sought the mountain streams for water pure enough to temper the blade. Along the way, he met a humble miner named Alden, who shared stories of the mountain's heart and warned of shadows creeping near. Rowan also visited an old herbalist, who gave him a sprig of mountain thyme said to protect against evil. With each step, Rowan felt the weight of the sword he was to make. Not just metal, but hope. Part 4. Forging the blade back at the forge, Rowan worked tirelessly. Sparks flew, and the hammer rang against the anvil like thunder. Days turned to nights, and nights to dawns. Lady Isolde visited often, watching the sword take shape. a shimmering blade with a blue steel hue and runes etched along its length. Rowan whispered to the sword, as if it were alive, promising it would serve the light. The village gathered one evening to witness the sword's completion. The firelight danced on its polished edge, and Rowan held it up, a silent vow between maker, blade, and bearer. Part 5. The Journey North. With the sword wrapped in velvet, Lady Isolde prepared to leave. Rowan handed it to her with a steady hand and a hopeful heart. "You carry not just metal, but the courage of Hearthglen," he said. She smiled, her eyes fierce with determination. Together, they walked to the village edge where the path led north, toward unknown dangers and uncertain fate. As she disappeared into the twilight, Rowan felt a quiet pride and a deep peace settle in his chest. Part 6. The legacy of the forge, seasons passed, and Hearthglen thrived. Rowan's forge remained a place of warmth and strength. Villagers spoke of Lady Isolde and her sword, a beacon of hope in dark times. Rowan returned to his work, crafting tools and dreams, knowing the promise of the forge was more than metal. It was the courage to believe in a better tomorrow. Under the soft glow of his lantern, with the forge's ember dying down, Rowan closed his eyes and drifted into peaceful sleep, the sound of hammering hearts still echoing in the night. The Journey of Sir Eamon. Prologue. The village of Eldermoor. In the peaceful village of Eldermoor, nestled in a valley where silver rivers whispered through ancient oaks, lived a young man named Eamon. The villagers knew him as a humble farmer's son, but his heart burned with dreams far beyond the golden fields and stone cottages. He longed for adventure, for honor, for a purpose worthy of the legends he heard by the fire. Each day, Eamon tended the soil and cared for his aging father. Yet when the stars shimmered in the velvet sky, he would climb the hill outside the village, gaze toward the distant mountains, and imagine the quests that awaited beyond the horizon. Chapter 1. The call to arms one cool autumn morning. As a gentle mist curled around the village rooftops, a rider arrived. His armor gleamed dully beneath the overcast sky, and his banner bore the sigil of the kingdom, a golden lion on a field of deep blue. The rider carried a message from King Aldrich himself. Dark times were coming. A band of outlaws, led by a cruel warlord, threatened the borderlands, burning villages and stealing what little the people had. The village elders gathered in the square. The king called for able men to join the fight, promising honor and reward. Eamon's heart raced. He saw his chance to step beyond the fields, to become more than a boy with dreams. With his father's blessing and a worn leather satchel, Eamon prepared to leave, his thoughts heavy with hope and fear. Chapter 2. Farewell to Eldermoor. The morning of departure was calm, the village bathed in soft golden light. Friends and family gathered to say goodbye. Eamon's mother pressed a small wooden charm into his hand, a carved raven, a symbol of protection. As he walked away, the smell of fresh bread and blooming heather lingered behind him. The road ahead was long and uncertain, winding through forests where shadows danced and mysteries waited. Eamon carried with him only a sword his father had given, rusty but sturdy, and a heart full of determination. Chapter 3. The Forest of Whispers. After days of travel, Eamon reached the edge of the Forest of Whispers, so named for the soft, eerie murmurs carried on the wind. The trees towered like ancient sentinels, their leaves rustling secrets of ages past. As he ventured deeper, the forest seemed alive, watching him. Birds called out unfamiliar songs, and strange lights flickered between the branches. Suddenly, a fox with gleaming amber eyes appeared. It did not flee but seemed to beckon him onward. Trusting the creature, Eamon followed, feeling the forest's magic stir around him. He came upon a hidden glade where an old hermit sat beside a crystal-clear spring. The hermit spoke of courage, of choices that shape destiny, and handed Eamon a silver pendant, warm to the touch. Chapter 4. The Village of Ravenswood. Emerging from the forest, Eamon found himself in Ravenswood, a town scarred by recent raids. The villagers' eyes held fear, but also hope. He joined the local militia, training with sword and shield. Days passed in sweat and discipline, nights in quiet conversation by the fire. There he met Ilara, a skilled healer whose knowledge of herbs and kindness warmed even the coldest nights. Their friendship grew, a gentle light amid the looming darkness. Chapter 5. The Siege of Stonekeep. Word came that the warlord's forces had laid siege to Stonekeep, a fortress guarding the kingdom's heart. Eamon and his comrades marched, their spirits steeled for battle. The siege was long and brutal. Arrows darkened the sky, and the clash of steel echoed through the valley. Eamon fought bravely, his sword flashing like lightning. One night, as the enemy gathered for a final assault, Eamon and Ilara slipped through the shadows to deliver a secret message that turned the tide of battle. When the warlord was finally defeated, the sun rose over Stonekeep, casting golden light on a weary but victorious army. Chapter 6. Return to Eldermoor. With peace restored, Eamon returned home a changed man. The fields of Eldermoor welcomed him back, but he saw them through new eyes, eyes that had witnessed courage, loss, and love. His father smiled with pride, and Ilara came with him, choosing to settle in the village. Together, they nurtured the land and the people, their stories weaving into the fabric of Eldermoor. As twilight fell, Eamon sat beneath the stars, the silver pendant glowing softly at his chest, a reminder that every journey begins with a single step and ends with a heart at peace. The Silent Song of Ardenfell. Prologue. The Hidden Veil. In the quiet valley of Ardenfell, wrapped in mist and mystery, lived a young bard named Leora. Her voice was soft, like a breeze over the wildflowers. Yet when she sang, the whole forest seemed to hold its breath. Ardenfell was a place forgotten by most maps, where winding paths led to ancient stones and sparkling streams. The villagers lived simply, farmers, blacksmiths, and traders, but all awaited the return of the lost melody that was said to bring peace to troubled hearts. Chapter 1. The Whispering Woods. Leora wandered often into the Whispering Woods, where the trees murmured secrets in the language of the wind. One evening, beneath a sky brushed with stars, she heard a faint tune, carried far and faint, like a dream slipping through the leaves. Guided by the melody, she ventured deeper than ever before, until she found a clearing where silver light shimmered on an ancient harp, resting against a mossy stone. The harp hummed with quiet power, and when Leora plucked its strings, a song filled the air, soft and haunting, a song of old promises and forgotten magic. Chapter 2. The Stranger in the Mist. As dawn broke, a stranger appeared at the edge of Ardenfell. He was tall and cloaked in gray, with eyes like storm clouds and a heavy burden on his shoulders. He called himself Kalin, a traveler seeking the lost song that could heal the fractured lands beyond the veil. Leora shared the harp's melody with him, and together they vowed to restore its power, to bring hope back to a world shadowed by fear. Chapter 3. The journey begins. Leaving the safety of Ardenfell, Leora and Kalin traveled through rolling hills and forgotten ruins, their nights filled with stories and songs whispered beneath the stars. Each village they passed carried its own sorrow. A farmer's field scorched by drought, a child lost to shadow, a town's laughter silenced by war. The song grew stronger as Leora sang, weaving light into darkness, kindling courage where despair had taken root. Chapter 4. The Festival of Lights. Their journey brought them to the great city of Varennes, where the Festival of Lights was held to honor the coming of spring. Among flickering lanterns and joyous dancers, Leora sang the silent song aloud, and the crowd fell into a hush as the music wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Old wounds began to heal, and strangers found kinship. For a moment, the city remembered peace. Chapter 5. The Final Note. But the journey was not without peril. Dark forces sought to silence the song forever, fearing the light it would bring. In a shadowed valley beneath stormy skies, Leora and Kaelin faced their greatest trial. With the harp strings in her hands and Kaelin's steady sword at her side, they stood against the encroaching night. Leora's voice rose, clear, strong, unwavering, and the song shattered the darkness, restoring hope to the world once more. Epilogue. The song lives on. Returning to Ardenfell, Leora placed the harp beside the ancient stones, where its melody would never fade. Villagers sang by the fireside, children dreamed of adventures, and the valley blossomed anew. And whenever the wind stirred the leaves, those who listened closely could hear the silent song, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light and hope endure.